hello, everyone, and welcome to a podcast for the home health leadership community. We wanted to get an expert on in the area of human resources, HR, because we all just love HR in our current positions. And if you're in that middle management to higher management role that most of our members are, you have to make this HR decisions whether you know you are or not. You have to be a good partner with an HR professional in order to keep your house in order. And Tanya, you know Tanya and I, you listen to us probably too much, right, Tanya? But we're gonna probably resonate in your head for a while. But I wanted to welcome Derek Fenwick. He was so kind to offer his limited time and joining us and giving us some expertise. Derek, tell us a little bit about what you do and what you think about HR.
Yeah, thanks, Sherry, and thanks, Tanya. I appreciate the invite. My story is that I'm a clinician first. I went to physical therapy school, and my career, I'm now mid-career, and I'm now the vice president of people and culture at a company's Infinity Rehab in the skilled nursing industry, which was not at all what was planned in PT school. But I think the fun story and kind of my day-to-day now is dealing with a lot of employee experience, everything employee experience, whether it comes to, the recruiting and the acquisition part, to the engagement part, to just, culture and, anything that touches our people, you name it. And I think, the thing that I often say for myself is I kind of came in the side door of HR. And it's a gift, I think, to have had a clinical background and operations background prior to doing this role now, because I've treated patients, I've managed small departments, regions. Like I know what your listeners are going through, and a lot of what I try to do to kind of put strategies in place are things that are right in the flow of work, as best as I can make sense, or at least I go ask the questions to our frontline clinicians and kind of get feedback regularly. Rather than just pushing stuff on there. So I know I often say to our employees who don't necessarily want to take a call with me, HR doesn't always have the best connotation, but at the same time, there's a way to do it right, and I'm happy to be here talking about that.
Well, we appreciate it. And I just wrote down something you said that I wanted to just let you expand on a little bit. It's a gift to have operational experience in your position. I see that as an opportunity for folks that maybe are thinking about they could have the acumen for HR, getting training and moving into that position, because there is a high need for HR professionals, especially in medical. Is there not?
Oh, for sure. And I one of my, with where my career is going, one of the things I want to do is encourage more clinicians who are looking for, non-hands-on care work that maybe want to do something a little different than operations. I mean, certainly people operations is the term in my area too. But yeah, imagine it. And some of your listeners, I'm sure, could, if you're in a manager role now, you were probably an individual contributor at one point. People probably came to you to do more, and now you've taken on more, and you got to balance out, well, how do I do more, have more responsibility with no more hours in the day? And you're kind of working it. It's the same whenever you kind of go into more of an HR heavy position. I mean, your job is people, and that's overwhelming, but also super exciting. I think we're trained as clinicians to be very people centric, and it's one of the reasons I think more and more clinicians could be really great in the HR space. But I think you have to overcome that kind of imposter syndrome, kind of, that feeling if you get there, and just go back to, like, I know at its core what my employees are doing in the day to day. I've done it, or at least I've had some experience, and that helps make me and my team's work way more relevant to be able to, just as a quick concrete example that may come up again when we're talking about engagement. We pivoted a couple years ago from annual performance reviews to quarterly check-ins, and we've gotten rave reviews about that, because there's nothing mandating annual performance reviews. It's kind of an out-of-date practice, and so we heard that. We were no different. We listened really deeply to our employees, and now we do every quarter a 15, 20-minute conversation with a little bit of a template. The managers can kind of adjust it a little bit as they need to talk about that individual employee's needs. And we get, great feedback now. And that really came from, me being a manager doing performance reviews and saying, like, yeah, these are pretty horrible. How can we do this better? And so there is a confidence that comes with, like, I've experienced this and it could be better, and then being in a position to be able to impact it.
Well, Derek, Can you elaborate a little bit on the quarterly check-in? So I'm thinking, first of all, I would love to be back in leadership and not to have to do performance reviews, especially when they're all due like at the same time of the end of the year. I used to call it my box of chocolate and red wine activity because I never knew else to get through it.
Yeah.
But with the quarterly check-ins, how do you tie performance review raises or anything to those quarterly check-ins? How does that work? Like, how
Yeah.
do you continually connect rewards, or don't you? Do you say rewards are done differently?
Yeah, we've tried to disconnect. I think a lot of places, best practice is definitely not to tie total rewards raises directly with a review, because it even if it's not intentionally tied, it's a single point in time. People, it just you can imagine. Your listeners probably don't need to be explained like how that can kind of mess up a dynamic of like fluid, truthful, candid dialogue about that. And so what we do is we have it in our HR system once a quarter. A set of questions goes out. It's the same questions every month or every quarter. We touch on. We've got one about let's talk about something that you're proud that you did, and it gives the manager an opportunity to do some quick recognition. How do you feel like you're performing in your position? And that opens up the door for the manager to bring up something that maybe the employee doesn't. How can I support you in your development? We tell our managers often it's most helpful and most engaging with employees if you go back and look at what you talked about last quarter before walking into this. So it's not like this fresh, like, oh, reading the questions off. It's like, oh, you talked about this last quarter. Like, did you take any steps on that? And then our final question on our template is there anything else you want to talk about today? So, I mean, really, really broad. We ask for documentation. Then when we do annual raises, and that kind of moves around within a year, sometimes for budget purposes, we just say, go back and review the body of work, all 4 of the last quarterly check-ins, other performance tools that we have, and make your wage, performance-based decisions on the whole body of work. And people get that. I think the hardest thing is just taking the time to document throughout the year. But when you have it in the flow of work, that's a common term that I use a lot. Whenever we're trying to influence change from a people and culture perspective, is like, don't have them go sit down in a meeting. If you can do the training in side by side with them, if you could say, hey, go try this and come back and tell me how it went in the flow of work, like that's the pace of our lives today. And so same thing, just teeing them up. It's really easy. Get your feedback in, and then when you do have a decision to make, you've got more data to review.
How many employees would you say that you're managing in your position right now?
We have around 700 employees at our company, roughly 300 full-time, part-time, and roughly 400 all or PRN contingent workers throughout our organization.
And that's an interesting question because we have different levels of sizes of agencies of folks that are members of our community. And so to know that someone with 700 people minimum, because you have your PRNs and everything else, is able to get this at this level and have that position. I know that we've got folks that are listening to this that are saying, I can't afford a people engagement person. And I'm, as a previous agency owner, I'm a believer that I think everyone in your leadership team should be a people engagement person. I think that's something that is sorely missing in some of our agencies and some of our management. What kind of additional training would you recommend, just hot button, for a clinician that wanted to consider making this move? Is there, in general, is there just say, hey, start here and then see where it takes you kind of place?
Yeah, I mean, the place that I often recommend people go to is the Society for HR Management. It's often referred to as SHRM as an acronym, SHRM. There's another one or two out there that are kind of national associations. There's actually one in healthcare that I'm just starting to get into. So HR professionals that are in healthcare that I just recently joined and I'm getting into. So, kind of getting on the old Google, kind of, checking out that space. SHRM for sure has a kind of a little bit of a track, like what does your body of competence and knowledge look like to be an effective HR professional? That's something I did many years ago. Did some training and learning in that space to kind of round out the legal stuff, the kind of maybe policy procedure stuff, the stuff that maybe I didn't pick up. But there's a really a lot of good kind of structures and frameworks out there. by some national associations, and there are probably some niche ones too if somebody wants to kind of target a certain area. But I mean, you will probably, with the exception of that HR Professionals in Healthcare Association that I'm just starting to get into, most of them is, clinicians aren't the majority of the members, and so you're kind of getting out of that clinical world into a new world, building a new network. But people are people, and I think that's what makes us so effective with our patients. It's the same thing that makes me effective with our employees is the fact that we're just getting to the core of our work is working with people just in a different way.
Derek, you said something in the last this question that I really loved, in the flow of work. And I know we're talking about some gamification and employee engagement and stuff, and that made me kind of think of the gamification. Can you just a little bit expand about, like, how do you get your managers to kind of think about that in the flow of work? I'm thinking about back to my management experience and how I would try to really regularly connect to people and connect where they were. And so I really love that statement. And then anything that with that you've had as fun gamification or translating in the flow of work to a fun activity.
Yeah, for sure. A few thoughts come to mind. I had a chance to read the article that I know your listeners are looking at too. The some of the pros, the article laid out a lot of pros about gamification in my experience, and that when it's well designed, it can be, rewards can be easy to access, that can be really fun, engaging. The con, and as I'm somebody that gets pinged by vendors trying to sell us stuff, is that it can be expensive too, to try to deploy a system. And often, if the smaller of a practice you are, the less likely it is that they're going to have a pricing model that actually works for you to come onto their gamification system, where it's like, oh, all your employees are here and you can go here and give them recognitions, and they can go get an Amazon gift card when they get so many points. Like, again, all really great. I think they're a little bit inaccessible for smaller organizations, and sometimes cost prohibitive, even if you're of an organization like of our size. We don't have any official gamification platforms at the moment because we have other priorities to spend on. And so I think, that doesn't mean you can't take advantage of that. And I think that some of the things, as I was reading that article, thinking about this podcast, you've got tools at your disposal right now that are either low cost, no cost, that can be gamification. In fact, the article actually pointed one out. It was the insurance agency that talked about their wheel of wow, and they don't go into a lot of detail, but I imagine it's like first day on the job or new onboarding experience, come in, spin the wheel of wow, like win a prize. You want it to be something more than like a pencil or something, like something that you're like, oh, there's like $100, $50, low cost, relatively speaking, to say, you get to pick this. Like that's low budget gamification right there. And so, yeah, we do a lot of trying to respect our clinicians' time, obviously. So any systems and processes, I'm always trying to imagine, like, how do we make it as efficient, fluid, anticipating their needs. But the number one thing that, whether you gamify it or just do it, Sherry, you asked earlier about some of the things that maybe are like, what's the thing that kind of eats at you, or what are we doing wrong as an industry? The thing that we're doing wrong, or I'll split that and say the thing that we could be doing more right, is just recognizing and appreciating our people. There was an old Gallup study that said that human beings want to be recognized for a job well done every 7 days, and that's really frequent. To think about that, and so even our quarterly check-ins, I'll often talk about, with our managers, like, that's not the only time you should be telling people that recognition, right? It should be spot recognition in the moment, as specific as possible. You can gamify that. You could have a little leaderboard. You could have even if it's not a game, but I had one manager at one point, when we were on a little bit of a different initiative talking about leadership practices, that they would just take turns writing whenever they recognize a leadership practice in the moment and put it on a bulletin board for everybody to see. And they, at their team meeting, would kind of celebrate that. So it's those type of things can make you really impactful as a manager. And again, it's a human thing. The biggest tip that I always have to remind managers of is it's not enough to say, great job. You got to be more specific. You got to be as close to the moment as possible, and you got to be respectful. of what that individual person wants, whether that's private recognition, public recognition. And we have actually a tool at Infinity that our managers can kind of do it in advance when a new employee joins to kind of know some of their preferences and then hopefully refer to that to try to get that right. But even in, I often tell people too, it's better to take a chance if you're not for sure if somebody wants to be recognized publicly, privately. Do the recognition. If somebody approaches you later and say, hey, that made me a little uncomfortable, you've learned for the next time, rather than hold it back, right? Take the chance, try to be as respectful, anticipating needs, but just working that into your day-to-day practice. You would be surprised, maybe not surprised, but I see a lot of evidence where our managers do that. Just that level of deeper engagement, motivation for the job just really pops.
And I see that with the new generation. I'm a Gen Xer, and Tanya is also a Gen Xer. And I'm not going to assume what your generation is, but we lived on a lot of hose water and no recognition. We lived on a lot of, go outside and don't come back in until I tell you to kind of things. And our generation may not require as much of that daily affirmations, which I think is wonderful. The next generation, they're used to immediacy. They're used to things being right in their face as quick as they want to get it. So I want to, do you encourage our listeners to use as much of the technology as they can? I know when I first started doing marketing, I didn't like video. I'm not a big video watcher. This next generation, that's all they do is video, it seems like. Those kinds of things, would you encourage them to use that tech in a way to reach the Gen Z and Alpha generation that are coming into the workforce? What are your thoughts on that?
100%. I tell this to our managers often. When there's a manager and employee that have a disagreement about how something's going to be done, like what's the better way to handle it? Force the employee into the manager's way, or have the manager listen to the employee and maybe adapt their expectations. And it's always the other way. It's always the manager needs to be the one to adapt. And I think for those of us that are in the second half of our career or beyond, generational changes happen. We experienced it when we were younger, thinking about the older folks that weren't listening to us. How would we have felt at the moment if they would have said, can you tell me a little bit more about TikTok? Can you actually ask me for a little bit of maybe to help figuring out how to use Microsoft Teams most effectively? I mean, those are real conversations that we have in our organization, trying to bridge that experience, because your manager has to be the one to adapt. And it's okay to be a little vulnerable and maybe even ask for some support on some of these things. But yeah, the effort to try it will be recognized. That's been my experience. And the gain for giving it a try and keeping your skills fresh, especially with the world speeding up every day and technology just being at the forefront, is to be a little curious, give it a shot the best that you can, and lean into it. Because I can tell you, and I've witnessed this. I've been in my company now 14 years. A lot of really great leaders that at one point were younger and now they're a little bit older, and to kind of witness sometimes people that you've known for a long time, and I'm probably included in this too, to kind of be like, well, this is what's gotten me here has served me so well. I'll just carry this on to the end of my career. And you start sounding like that person that's like, well, we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way. It can happen without you knowing it. And so you just have to be really mindful and lean into those new skills to keep yourself fresh and relevant.
I could talk to you for a very long time, but I know I want to be respectful of the time that you've given us. And Tanya, do you have any final questions or final statements?
I have a very important question for Derek. Tell me about your love of baseball and where you're headed with your baseball goals.
That is to be determined. I grew up on baseball. I grew up, you can see it in the background, I'm sure. I had to put something on that wall during my early days of remote work because it looked like I worked in like an asylum or something, just with like boring walls around me. But yeah, it's a love. I grew up a St. Louis Cardinals fan, playing and just loving to watch the game. Some of my favorite pre-child experiences were I'm in Portland, Oregon now, driving up to Seattle and sitting with the latest edition of Harvard Business Review and a beer in the other hand, and just like soaking in the experience for a couple hours. But it's shifted this year, Tanya. I coached my kiddos. I have two kids. Coached one of them in T-ball, kind of early, coach pitch, and our daughter, my wife, was coaching her, and thinking that was going to kind of blossom into, the father-son, father-daughter stuff. And each of them this last spring season said they didn't want to play, and so we've been out of the lip. Yeah, it kind of hurts your heart a little bit, but at the same time, they've found my little guy Lucas loves Taekwondo. My daughter Eliana loves ballet. So we're finding new spaces. But in terms of baseball, I mean, and with two kids, like I don't have time to watch my MLB TV subscription from 4 to 10 Pacific every day like I did, 15, 20 years ago. So still kind of figuring that out. But I mean, I love the team aspect of it, and just the relaxed pace and the strategy of it. So I'm sure it'll always be part of me.
And
I think there's a way to translate that into some HR strategy and some HR gamification.
That's
I
right.
was just
That's
gonna
right.
say, I always use athletic because I played sports in college. I always use athletic experiences to frame questions. And Tanya is a great sports fan, and I say that sarcastically because they score points in baseball, right, Tanya?
Yes, yes. And it's not fair that they blame the poor pitcher for everything that he does. That just doesn't
Right.
make any sense for me. The pitcher shouldn't have
No,
to
I
take
agree.
responsibility for everything this team screws up.
Same with quarterback in football. I'm with you. Yeah, there's a reason there's 9 players or 11 players or whatever there are depending on the sport out there.
And even
Yeah.
in the best team, occasionally your left fielder has to come in and pitch, right? There was a video yesterday because I also have the Major League Baseball subscription because I'm a longtime baseball softball fan, and they had a pitcher come in and he literally lobbed the ball because they had no pitchers left or everybody was injured and it was kind of a blowout. And so they brought somebody in who never played that position to play that position for a moment. And that to me translates into what you sometimes ask your employees to do. You sometimes ask them to play out of position, and that's not as comfortable as what you're used to doing. And so delivering that message has to be done in a way that's going to be accepted. I cannot thank you enough for your time, Derek. And I'm going to put a pin in this because I think we need to have you back again. Let us know when you have some time because I know that you could add some value into what we're trying to do with our community. So thank you so much. Tanya, did you have anything else?
Yeah, Derek, I want to thank you also. And you made me, I haven't been spending a lot of time in the operations in healthcare world and spending it in academia. And although it's the same, it's a little different. And you just reminded me of some of the great things that the organization I worked for before did with gamification and kind of that consistent feedback. And, I'm actually just thinking, I used to do thank you cards every week to team members and doing that 7-day feedback. And I'm like, I don't do that with my faculty because we started as a group and we're building something and I'm like, I need to do that.
Yeah.
So thank you for reminding me of some of those really important things that really engage people. And no matter what setting you're in, you need to continue to engage the folks around you. So thank you for bringing those back into my brain.
And to our members, if you enjoyed Derek, please let us know. We would love to share some feedback with Derek about what he's doing, and I hope that you got some nuggets. Like Tanya just said, she got a nugget. I got reminded of some nuggets, and we've been doing this for a long time. And I always say, and since Methuselah wore short pants, we've been doing this. And so I want to thank you again, Derek, so much. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and we'll see everyone at our meetup. Thank you so much.